Tells me what to do without making me look dumb. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I will jump in, and Mary, I jotted your questions down, but if I don't touch on them, as if you have follow-up questions or don't touch on them, but please feel free to bring this up again. I'll make sure I do so, and I will take us for a drive in Leo. So you all already saw my little opening slide stuff before, so I'll pass on some of that. And we'll jump right into the system here. So again, we do appreciate you all taking time for to chat with us. Leo was built at Haley's alma mater, Duke University, here in lovely, actually sunny right now, Durham, North Carolina, and where we're headquartered. And so it was made for med schools, and is branched out into just health professions institutions. And we do have, I know, David, we spoke before, we do have currently 2 other PA school clients to date. We also have other institutions that we are speaking with about using Leo in multiple settings, multiple program types, med and PA and pharm and that kind of thing as well, which Leo can handle. And then we're always continuing to grow and work with other program types. So as we work with different program types or more in the PA market, we do always make sure we take feedback and continue to grow the product in a way that is appropriate for folks. So you'll see actually today we'll see some things that are that have been feature upgrades and updates since we last spoke. Even actually quite a few really neat things. So just a quick overview of what we'll go through today. We'll talk about calendaring and events really with scheduling for that, both didactic and clinical years. I'll touch on lotteries or optimization, and then evaluations for both course, but then in a clinical setting for student evaluations, patient encounter tracking, and our academic portrait, which really brings all of those things together. And I'll make sure to talk about the different levels of who can see what security settings and those types of things for sure. So as we had seen before, Leo does have, I'm just actually going to click to this little image. Leo does have a really robust feature set because we do support our client partners from their didactic and clinical years, and we support different modalities of how that curriculum is delivered, whether it's a school doing two didactic years and 2 clinical years, or 1 and 3, or 3 and 1, or however schools do that. We're able to support that in any way through many of the features that you see here in the feature set in Leo. We often have folks when they do, Mary mentioned about support and implementation. We do have a very strategic way in which we work with our new clients when we go through implementation, because we're looking at a full feature wheel here that has a whole lot of stuff there. We want to make sure that the way in which it's set up in your institution is exactly what you need, not just for that day one, but 5 years from now, when you're continuing to grow, when your program is continuing to add new features and grow, we want it to be a healthy, sustainable situation for you all as well. So our team creates that implementation with you hand in hand to make sure that that's appropriate through each of these features in the appropriate setting. And we'll get to this later, but we also don't do the thing where we do an implementation, throw a piece of software at you and say, hey, have a nice life. We have pretty robust support and more than enough documentation, videos, asynchronous trainings that you students and faculty can take as well.
So Dan, when you're kind of talking about there's almost like 2 different concepts of client support. Like there's the initial training on the software, right, which would be something we'd be looking to do potentially as a team, or with setting up individual times or attending classes. I mean, is that what you're talking about? And then the second piece would be like individual problem support. So exactly. Could you talk about those separately?
Yeah, great question. So so first with the implementation, it's exactly what you were explaining. We tend to do a train the trainer type of model. That tends to be of most value for, especially at our institutions where in health professions education, there's a lot of cooks in your kitchen. So we, at best we can, want to identify the super users of sort at your campus that can be your point person there. And throughout, so our standard implementation time is 4 to 6 months, depending on which features you're implementing. And that's truly done because there's a lot of data that needs to come in. So throughout that process, they will help not just with teaching you the software, but making sure that by the time you go live with your faculty and your students, that you'll have the data that you need in to run your program appropriately, both in the back end for site visit prep and those types of things, and then also what I like to call more front-facing types of information for faculty and students, whether that's course materials, quizzes, and documentation that you'd have for any type of course, your scheduling, all of that. So the standard implementation through with Leo is that they'll meet with you weekly throughout the process. They have a very well organized. It's this Excel spreadsheet that they really create this week by week game plan with you all based on the features that you want to implement, and also based on your bandwidth and your team. So for example, we're onboarding. We just had a new client. Actually, a vet school, which is neat for us. So we just had a vet school start this week, and when one of the questions that's asked during that implementation was, tell us about your staff, so we can understand the bandwidth on your end that you have. So we're not just dumping a ton of stuff and saying, go, we'll see you next week. Let's, hopefully you're ready to go. So it really is an opportunity where they listen to you quite a bit to start, just to have an idea on what your team can handle. After that 4 to 6 month period has expired and your implementation is done and you're ready to go live with your students, then there is support beyond that. If you want to put a ticket in, anything from, I think there's, a bug to, we're using, we haven't used evaluations yet. I want to learn more about evaluations. I mean, so it can be further, getting more information on the product as well. And then along with that, we understand. So much of our team actually comes from health professions education, myself included. So we have a really good grasp on the idea that not every person learns the same. And so we have a user guide that truly, honestly, is second to none. We don't throw a PDF, a 96-page PDF at you and say, good luck, do the control find and find what you need. It's a living website that has a great search feature that takes you where you need to go based on, and they do have articles and step-by-step walkthroughs for faculty and students. So any type of user can have the information they need there. We also have video tutorials in there as well. So we know folks like their learners that way. And then for your kinesthetic learners, we actually have orientation modules built around different feature sets, curriculum mapping, assessments, those different, bigger feature sets in Leo that your faculty and students can actually take within Leo. So actually, I know that the Idaho Com uses our orientation module with their students in that way. So all of your students can be oriented to the basics of Leo before they even step foot in your building. So I don't know with COVID how orientation is going these days, but if you did the good old fashioned, threw all your students in a room and talked at them for a week or however long your orientation is, they already could have had their login to Leo, gone through, gotten basic training on how to find the information they would need to. So when they get to orientation time with you all, it could just be a Q&A. And that's something that they can live and go through. And same with faculty. If you're training a bunch of faculty, they can go through and do that self-paced as well, so that they're actually clicking through and doing the items that's asked of them, so that when it's time to actually do it, they've done it before. And again, those are ongoing, available throughout, and our team updates those. So if features change or anything like that, you don't have to worry about trying to update those orientation modules. We update them and then we repost them to your system for you.
Side question there, Dan. So I noticed that you have quite a few medical schools that you work with, right? And so are there any active user groups online made up of faculty that have Leo in common and kind of help settings like that?
That's a great question. So we will, our team will help to, if you have a specific question or project that you're trying to work through. Right now, we help to get folks connected in that way. However, we don't have like an open community forum. We do have a listserv that we provide the chance for folks to message back and forth in. However, we don't have like that a cohort in that way specifically, where it's just an open forum.
Okay,
But
thanks, Dan.
if you reached out to one of our trainers and said, "Hey, I'm trying to do X. Do you have anyone?" They very quickly would get you in touch with someone, if of course, if they're willing as well.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Of course. So any other questions on the support or implementation before we kind of knock out some of the feature stuff? No. Cool. All right. So as we talked about before, the Leo is calendar based, so that it brings all those features together. A calendar is something that is familiar to all of us. So each user sees their own calendar. So as students, if you're enrolled in a course, you see those courses. If you're faculty, same. You can, and based on your and then, like right now, I'm the system admin or the super user, so I see the totality of the system we're looking at today, and every school has a handful of those. So, but if for faculty, for example, they can see, of course, the courses that they're teaching and they've been assigned to. They can also be granted access to have view like read-only access to other courses that are in the curriculum, but they aren't necessarily teaching. So just like a Word doc with read-only access, they can see it, they can't do anything, can't change the mapping, can't post anything. It's truly just so they can, for the most part, view learning objectives and see the materials. They also can filter their calendar. So if I were faculty and this were my calendar and I could see these other courses, but I just want to focus on mine and block out the other noise, I could go into the filter, and there's something where I can do only the events that I'm an instructor for. And once I close this, you can see I'm just teaching on these 2 days. And then if I can just clear the filter right here, and it goes back to the primary calendar. So we do have the 2 different types of events. We have the single, what you would expect to be a classic, just a class lecture time, which each of these individual blocks. We have long events as well. So any event that occurs over a day, really, that can be a duration of time. These are a week long. If you're doing like scheduling at clinical settings, and student X is going to be at hospital Y for the whole month, you can just make it a 1 month long event. Instead of having to put on a single event every single day, you would do one event that spans that duration of time. And just like you can with any of the events, so I'm going to click into like a lecture event now, just like you can click in and have the description and videos and your mapping and discussions and announcements and PowerPoint materials and any materials that you really want to post here. You can do that for the long events as well. And so the framework of didactic and clinical courses are essentially the same in Leo. They both operate in that course shell.
That's kind of interesting, Dan. I guess I'm trying to understand something about that, because we don't really, in the clinical year, we don't really deal with the students on a daily basis. We're not going to post individual things usually for the rotations. We essentially right now, we schedule them for 5 weeks in specific rotations with an academic week in between. They do 8 rotations. And then within those, rotations, we have activity types. And so when I'm looking at this, like what I typically would enter, I have rotations 1 through 8. I have the preceptor, I have marked what their availability is. And then I would go in and assign the student to it, is what I'm used to.
Okay.
And I guess looking at this, I'm just trying to understand, like, I really I guess I'm wondering, can you do that? Or am I going into each individual student and blocking out a calendar for them?
That's a great question. No, it would be the way in which that you're doing it currently.
Okay.
So you would have this course shell structure, whether it's 1 5-week event essentially, or if it was a number of smaller events within that. And in this case, for example, I'm in an event right now. You have your people. I can, oops, I'm going to the wrong one here. I'm going to do this at the course level. At the course level, you can add students and faculty and staff just the same. So if you have a new preceptor to add and you want it to be on their calendar, you can. And then that would also affect their assignments for, if you had like evaluations the preceptor had to do with students, the evaluations that you set for the course, if that preceptor is assigned to that course or that rotation, they would have availability to do those evaluations. And the same with the students.
We did have a question come up when on our last call too about, I understand having different ranks of users. You know, we have preceptors and students, and I'm assuming, and please tell me if I'm assuming incorrectly,
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
there's different levels of confidentiality and access and things like that that go with that. But can the preceptors see one another? That was a concern that we had. You know, if they have this rank, because we're not wanting them to be able to look at each other. We don't want students to be able to look at each other. Like there was some confusion, I feel like, on our last call as to what that looks like.
Would you not want them to see that who else was enrolled in that course even? Is that?
We would want them to be able to see their own schedule, but not other preceptors' schedules. We wouldn't want them to, we want to be able to limit the access of what the student profile they can see and vice versa.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, great question. So you, as far as like the schedule is concerned, like what we're looking at here, you truly only see yours. If you don't want a faculty to have access to courses that they're not teaching, you can set it up like that to where they would truly just see what they're assigned to. Same with students. If Haley and I were both students, I would never see Haley's schedule. I won't, we're FERPA compliant as well, so I would never see any grade, anything like that related to Haley. The folks that see the students' information as well are the faculty that are assigned to those courses. But again, they have to have a specific level to be able to even see the grade book. Or
do you kind of treat preceptors like educators? I'm just trying to understand, because like, would it be a preceptor assigned to a course where we add students? Because this is kind of a different format than what I'm, okay.
Mary, that's spot on. And you know what it'd be is, in Leo, the term for preceptor is, we use clinical faculty is the role that I see in our system a lot for that. And clinical faculty can be assigned to courses, just individual events within a course, and they can have varying roles as well. So let's say in course X, you're truly just a preceptor. You have students coming into your clinic and you're providing some evals for them, and that's about it. You can have that role in course X. Let's say course Y, you're a course coordinator of that, and you actually are putting in grades, and you can be assigned to be that role. So you can be assigned as an individual user to have different roles and rights within different courses as well. So there is that level of, so it's not like you're just a flat across the board, like you're set as a preceptor and you can never do more or never do less. That based on role assignment in a course, you can affect that.
Okay, so I guess my other question would be, like, if we're using the term clinical faculty for preceptors, what about our actual clinical faculty? Like what, because that would be like a different role, right? Because that would be like people on the clinical year team that are responsible for grading. They should be able to see everybody, this and that. Like, what do you guys have a terminology for what that type of user would be?
So we do have in Leo something that's called, let's see if I have it here. It's called, we have dictionary terms, and that dictionary terms are terms that can be changed, but configured per client. So I'll do a check to see if those specifically are dictionary terms within Leo. I know, for example, right now I'm looking at, adding a new, faculty to this. If I click on the new faculty, I can have their role be proctor, observer, lecturer, facilitator, backup lecturer for that role. So, could like an observer role, for example, be more of that preceptor role in the setting? It could be without really digging into the security settings right now off the top of my head. I don't, and security settings can be changed.
Right.
As well.
Likely this is something we can kind of work around, but it gets a little confusing for me when you're talking about clinical faculty. It's like, are you talking about me and my team, like almost like a staff setting, or are you talking about preceptors, which would have a different level of access? There would be different evaluations attached to different groups and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and we truth be told, we have this pretty often when we have new clients come on board, because so many institutions do have like their institution specific lingo, and so our teams usually is able to be flexible within Leo in that way to help set that up. It would be, I said, I'll look at those dictionary terms to see if those are things that we can change, and Haley and I will follow up with you on that.
And then Dan, what about for preceptors? You mentioned onboarding for students, orientation for faculty. How about preceptors? Do you have abbreviated orientation materials for them so that they can navigate in Leo?
That's a great question. Do you, just very briefly, what would you ask your preceptors to do? I'll help me answer that more specifically.
And probably Mary could answer that
Yeah.
better than myself, but evaluations of the students, I think, would be one thing
Mhm.
that they would do.
Definitely. Well, what, you know, currently it's like when we have a new preceptor, they, I'll enter them initially into the system.
Mhm.
And they will be prompted when they get an evaluation, if they haven't been in before, to set up a login for themselves. Like, as in, I've set up the initial piece of it. It's them kind of creating a personalized password, that sort of thing. Then at that time, I think it takes them to a link to their personal profile, and then they're looking for, there's like an evaluations tab they can go to and go right into their evaluation.
Mhm.
That's the main way that our preceptors are working right now for the students, is that they enter their evaluations directly into eValue, and the students then have access to see them once they've been posted. So there's kind of a relationship there. The system will also remind them about evaluations. If they have trouble accessing it, I can generate a reset of their password, which is helpful. But that's really the main way that they use it. And the preceptors don't see their full profile. Like, I have a profile that's more extensive than what they see.
Mhm.
And I just know this from experience, having the ability to go in as a preceptor and as a student. I can see that there are some differences in what they can see. When we were talking about roles,
Okay.
like I said, I think that's also something that you're talking about as well.
Yeah, and that's a great questions. I appreciate, Mary, the description there. So with the training specific to that, more than likely we lean on the like the train the trainer mod like method, and give you like any of the super users. I don't know if it's Mary, if you in this sake, the information you would need to be able to train those preceptors specifically. I will say that so the preceptors I've worked with personally, it's been very similar to the experience you were just explaining, and we've made Leo. Like, I'm the developer. Our developers have made Leo in a way that is especially with that preceptor level, because we know that you know schools have folks all around the region, state, country, and it's really tough to train them up, even in this Zoom world in which we live. That it's probably truly easiest to learn for those functions for those folks alone. So right now I'm logged in, you know, in this my user account. I have my little image up here and my my little menu. We do have an eval portal that takes you just to only evals. These are right now we're looking at a list of evals that have been assigned to me to complete. So what the course the course that it's for, the name of the evaluation, if there's a title of the evaluation, these are all sortable as well, and the student being evaluated. So that's all. And I truly, from my home screen, clicked on my image, went to eval portal, I'm in here. If you have pre-scheduled evals, they will all be here. And just like you were saying, Mary, if they don't complete them, they will get an email saying you need to complete it. And it's something you can automate and set with timers in advance, so you don't have to be bad cop and always having the email sent from you. Leo will be bad cop for you. And of course, it knows to only send to the people that have not completed their evals. Now, if you're doing, we can also do real-time on-demand evals in Leo as well, to where if something isn't assigned, this is at least in my background, really helpful use in like a more didactic clinical skills kind of type setting, where if I'm a preceptor in a room and student X comes into the observation room, I can just click on evaluate someone else, go to the course. You're not going to have a million courses like our system does here. And you can just do an on-demand evaluation of the student, pick the student, and it's going to start it live right here. And I can just trigger that and go ahead and complete this evaluation of the student. with the different types of questions, whether they're, in this case, kind of like our rubric slider bar with comments that can be added to, just a little radio button questions. So really any type of question that you'd want to have in here, you'd be able to post in there. And then when you're done, you can make them mandatory or not. And when you're done, they would just hit submit. Now, on the flip side of that, if you don't have folks that are logging in very much, I'm gonna skip. So, for example, I used to work with preceptors that didn't know their login. Mary, you hit me there saying like the whole change your password. Like we've probably changed a ton of passwords in our careers for preceptors because they log in once every blue moon and then they can't remember what it was. In Leo, I just clicked over to a student account right now, just to show you that a student, if they have an encounter with a patient and they want to be evaluated on that by a preceptor, they can go into their eval portal, and this works great on mobile too. So they can do it on the fly with their phone and just request an evaluation. And if they request said evaluation, pick their course, and they'll only have likely one evaluation form. They can just start typing in the name of the faculty member they want, add a note if they want to put time, date, something to jog the preceptor's memory. That's what they requested it for, and hit submit. That will go to the preceptors that they selected, their email address. And so they're authenticated in Leo through their email. It's also the email of choice that they want in the system. I don't know about you. I used to work at Oklahoma State. I used to have folks that worked out in the panhandle of Oklahoma. And I know people call it the Texas panhandle, but as an adapted Okie, I call it the Oklahoma panhandle. And they didn't log into they didn't even know they had an OSU email address. So because of that, I would put their Gmail in there, or you could put their Gmail and and their ISUPA email address in there if you'd like. So it'll go to their email, and they'll be able, without we're even having to log in, since they're authenticated through that email, they'll be able to complete that eval right there on the spot. So for example, I'm Robert Guthrie in the system, the gentleman that I just sent that email to. So I have an email now in my box saying, here's an evaluation. And then I can just go in and complete that evaluation and just submit it. And one cool thing, so I'm going through and submitting an evaluation really quick. One really neat thing about the evaluation is that after you submit it, well, two things. One, the student picture's in there. So I always appreciate that. I've had folks evaluate the wrong student before, and that's a pain in the neck and also a FERPA scare to have students see the wrong grades. I promise I'm not being a millennial and just adding a bunch of and texting right now. I'm really taking care of this. So once I submit, I always just like to show this as well. I don't have access to anything else as the preceptor in that course. So I'm set up just to be the preceptor and score those students and submit that. That's it. So there's no too many cooks in the kitchen. There's no security concerns as well. While I didn't have to log in, I also have access to do nothing else except complete that one assigned eval, which is nice and helps reduce, again, those lovely cooks in the kitchen. And then I'm going to go back to my portal here. And then we do have, for each student, I'm back into the system admin portal. For each student, they have an academic portrait. The people that see the student's academic portrait there are three roles: the student themselves, and of course they only see their own academic portrait. No student will ever see someone else's unless they willingly show it to them. The assigned faculty advisors, and you can have multiple faculty advisors assigned to a student, and then someone in like the super user role will have access to that. They can help to oversee this. So in the demo system we have here, this faculty member has two students assigned, Kayla Vincent and Lucy Stone. And once I click on Lucy, I have her portrait. And this is really all information about Lucy from the day she walks into the door till she graduates is in here. If you have your students' emails still in the system, if they're not purged on your end, like if you don't have like an SSO that like wipes them out on your end, these students after graduation will still be able to access this information as well. I know you'd asked about that, Mary. So if they do have to come back and see that, you can leave them active with their school email address.
So once they become alumni, essentially, are we able to lock down the settings so that they can't add to those profiles after graduation, but they're able to come in and run reporting?
Ah, that's a great, I don't know the answer to that. I'll mark that and we'll get back to you. So, if just from a gut perspective, I would say that they could still change it. I don't know if there's a read-only access for a student's individual portfolio, however, or portrait. However, they can't export their portrait at the end of graduation and take that with them. So in theory, they wouldn't, if they weren't allowed to add to it anyway and just wanted read-only access, this exported portrait, which it's a zip file full of CSVs and other folders, that would have all the information from their portrait they could just take with them and own in a static way.
And Dan, if we're offering this to the students, is there an additional cost to keep these students with access past graduation time?
No, when you do your, like, when it's all that fun negotiation time that everyone loves to do, our pricing is set around number of students, but not we don't charge X amount per student. It's basically, like ranges of students, and then also the features and the timing around the implementation that you'd want to be doing from the get-go. So there is some timing element that's involved with that, but we don't do the thing where, let's say you have 200 students, for example, and your enrollment goes up and you have four extra students you weren't expecting that picked up, or you had X amount of students that dropped or whatever. You're not getting an extra bill for those 4 extra students. It's a set price that's agreed to, and we tend to do multi-year contracts. We're very upfront with that, so we really go into all those negotiations completely transparent with what what would be asked of you, and based on the amount of students that you'll have in the system, and again the features, but there's no specific upcharge here. There, we also don't do micro fees around the features. So let's say you go live in fall of 2022, for example, and in fall of 2023 there's a new another one of those features you're ready to start using at your institution. It doesn't become a line item. We know in advance. We're transparent that way. We don't do the micro fees based on features. I know there are some other companies that do that. That's not how we go about it. So in the portrait here for Lucy specifically, you can see not just those the highlights of Lucy. There's a portfolio that can be added. Items can be added for Lucy. These are just areas in which you can put in, upload documentation for, and these are all placeholder names. These all can change, but whether it's clinical research or letters of reference, whatever, that can all be saved for Lucy there. We also have custom demographics to track for Lucy. If again, whether it's address or application score, that type of information, if you track that at your institution. Even though it's that HIPAA word can be a little misleading, we are not the security level is not like HIPAA compliant. It's FERPA compliant. So we do always tell folks not to put HIPAA information in Leo, specific to students health information. And then the big highlight of the portrait here especially is that students can see all of students and their advisors again can see all of their active courses and their grade in that course. And if I click on more info, it takes me to an active grade book in that course as well. Breaks down all of my assignments or any graded item, and including the categories, so I can see how Lucy's doing in evals versus how she's doing overall in exams. We do have the average score for the whole cohort that Lucy can compare herself to. That's an option. Some folks love it. Some folks don't want to have the average score. That's totally up to you all if you want that on or off. So instead of having, especially if you're an advisor, instead of having to go to every single course Lucy might be in or ask Lucy to report all of her scores to you, they can just log in here and see all of the easily go course to course and see just Lucy's specific information on that grade book.
Yeah, can I clarify something that you said about HIPAA, for example? One of the things that we do keep currently on our students would be their immunization records, and things like that. Where is that housed? Is that outside of the portrait, or do you not house that in this program?
If we were to have anyone do that, it would be in the portrait. And it would be this trainings and certifications area, which that tab can change as well. If you did want to have some sort of immunizations. I'm not the expert on what would be considered specifically HIPAA, like student health information, versus them checking a box specifically on what required immunizations or trainings that they would have to do.
And it's not even that, it's that it would have to be like, for example, we ask them to provide us with like their COVID information, and then it is housed in their document. They received these vaccinations on these dates. For example, it's kind of important for credentialing, where that's something we have to be able to have at our fingertips and know is current.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if again, this is where I would house that information and have like that it was knocked out here. I'm just hesitant with some information not totally having to grasp myself individually on what would be considered HIPAA information versus just basic school requirement information. Even with COVID, for example.
That's kind of a bigger thing too, like, and maybe this comes in when we're talking about negotiations and things like that. Obviously, legal would be involved in that type of process in terms of what can be housed and what can't. I was just curious. I guess what I was curious about is like, is that something that's, because the students ask us for that stuff too sometimes.
Right.
Like they're trying to get a job and they're wanting to know. All of a sudden, they don't really know where all their immunizations are, and they're hoping that we have them from the past clinical years so that they can use them. So that's like a real scenario for us.
Yeah, and I think especially when Haley and I, our supervisor Allison, would be probably the one that to best speak on that, since she does handle the negotiations and some of that legal aspect for us as well. And so she would be the one I would kind of defer to it in my role, just to make sure, because you could have things in the about tab, you could have things in the portfolio too. I mean, if it were something that were deemed that allowable to have per your institution in Leo, you could even make a tab here that said immunizations, and just the same that I don't have anything uploaded there, just the same as I have like this general document uploaded under highlights, you could have I got this immunization, COVID, this that. So I mean, there are the places within the portrait that can most certainly house that in a nice, neat, easy way for the student to go back and look at. But just for the sake of my lack of understanding, I'd be hesitant to say what information would be allowed in there.
So Mary, I would imagine also that preceptor documentation would need to be tracked, licensing, etc. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So yeah, so how would that work?
So we do have in Leo, not only do we have the portrait for students, we do have every faculty, and again, preceptor can fall under that kind of, in this case, that kind of faculty umbrella. We do have a faculty portrait for each student. So in this role, this is a faculty portrait role that we're looking at, and they could have just the same documentation that can be uploaded there. So it doesn't just have to be CV. This is a totally configurable field that we're looking at with this. Same with the about. The about is basically just an open tab to add any information that you may want to, notes that you want to add. It does also track things like their workload. Their evaluations are actually found here as well. And we also link to your PubMed identifier to have their publications all housed in one location for them, for your faculty. But if you did have certain tracking that needed to be done, again, I would defer to either the about or the documents tab to be able to put that information in there. So, good question. I'm going to flip back really quickly. I know we're kind of running low on time. Yeah, it's funny how this always happens. So I do with the student portrait, and then I'll hit on lotteries before we go as well. We do have, the student can see their evaluations, the ones they've completed, the ones that have been others have completed of them, and also ones that they need to do. With our evaluations, it can be anything from the classic course evaluation that all students love to do, and at the end of every semester, you can also have students evaluating the faculty, the course, the faculty evaluating students. We have peer peer evaluations that could be done student to student. We also have self-reflective evals as well that students and faculty can complete, whether it's reflective of the course for faculty and their teaching, or of course a student and their performance. We do have attendance tracking as well with each event. We see this more with in didactic education, that folks like to use this. It can either be with a password or without. It's a pretty simple process. Students can put in for excused absences as well. So if a student has a conflict or an illness or something, whether it's didactic or clinical, they can put in a request for an excused absence, and that can be approved officially. If that does happen, it will be recorded here in their portrait as an excused absence. So we do delineate between those two. And then finally, we do have, I know we didn't talk about curriculum mapping, but with in Leo, we have something called themes. It's, you'll hear like terms like coils or threads applied to this as well. It's basically a way to look across your curriculum at given themes, and themes can be whatever you want them to be. So we have some folks that are doing EPAs, and they want to evaluate students against their EPAs. We have competency-based learning that some folks use, and they want to evaluate students against specific competencies. Those can actually be themes, and you can evaluate, and you can, as you can see here, you can tag individual evaluation questions, events, short or regular or long events, assignments, diagnoses, and procedures, all to themes in Leo. So that when, if a student wants to get their specific performance report, not just on that grade book, but see how in this case, how they're doing against clinical skills, that theme, because your themes could, again, they could be truly anything. So they could just be basic content areas as well. They can find the theme of their choice here. I have the clinical skills one highlighted, and they can see their performance over time. This is every evaluation question that they've ever had on a that was tied to a clinical skills theme, so that the student or the faculty can see across time Lucy's performance in that one given area. You also can get a breakdown of all all of the eval scores down here at the bottom. Again, Lucy has access to this as well, so she can sort by score and look at all the ones and see what who those were. Maybe Robert Guthrie gave her a lot of ones. Maybe she needs to reach out to Dr. Guthrie over that if there's a concern for her performance on how to do better. And again, advisors can see this as well to see where Lucy's struggling. One thing along this that's really great is that you also have all of the events that are tagged at clinical skills, and that's events in Leo are where the content lives, because it's each class event where you highlight that PowerPoint, video, whatever. So if Lucy is struggling in clinical skills, let's say, she could go back to old events that house that content and very quickly get to the content related to that area in which she's struggling, to hopefully streamline that remediation and improvement process for her, as opposed to maybe unfortunately finding out after the semester and a poor grade has happened. Any questions on that before we take a peek at lotteries?
No, I think I'd like to talk about lottery, and one other area I'd like to talk about would be what entering student encounters looks like when they're in their clinical year and they are having experiences that we'd like to log. Like, are they able to enter, for example, a diagnosis and potential procedures? Like, I'd like to see that before we go, in addition to talking about the lottery.
Let's do that. That's perfect. Thank you for that segue. Actually, it's almost like I Venmoed you $20 to ask that question, because I had that ready to go next. So I'm back in as Lucy, and we have on the student homepage here, one of the tabs that's always at the top is patient encounter tracking. So Lucy will track her own patient encounters. When you click on this, you can turn patient encounter tracking on based on the course itself. So Lucy, when she comes in to do encounter tracking, isn't going to have a list of the whole curriculum there. She's going to see just the courses where that's turned on. So right now I have just 2 courses, or in this case, clerkship as well. And when I click into that now, since I just clicked on that course, any entry I make will be specifically for this course. So if I do a new entry, and this is so funny, sometimes when we show these things, we know we have cool, upgrades, or especially if it's like a user interface fun thing coming. The user interface for this page is being updated the first week of January. Right now, it's kind of first or second week of January, so it looks much better on mobile as well. But that's all students do is they go through and they just, line by line, go down and add the patient encounter information. You can have preloaded locations in there. You can have preloaded residents in here as well. There is an NA option as well. So if they don't have a resident, and some of these are dictionary terms as well, as I mentioned before, that can be changed in the system. Again, they select the attending. Let's pick something different. The encounter type as well. So we do have, so if you have folks that are doing like practice in simulation standardized patient, it doesn't just have to be specifically with the patient's live. Age range, again, these are all dictionary terms here that we have in Leo. And then the diagnosis, you can either, they can start to type, oh, of course. They can double click and get the list of preloaded diagnoses. Leo comes with a preloaded list. You can also edit, add, delete, whatever you want with that list in your system. And then you can
You have the codes listed, like the diagnosis codes and the procedure codes in
we don't, to my knowledge, but that can be uploaded as well. So if you have like a CSV, you want to just throw in that's information you could bring into Leo. You can do more than one diagnosis, by the way. I know we'll get this question all the time. You can do more than one procedure as well.
Mm-hmm. And I'm imagining that procedures are optional somewhat, because you could have a diagnosis without a procedure, but you
Mm-hmm.
have to have a diagnosis, that kind of thing. We could say limits like that.
Exactly. So you don't.
And also limits for whether we don't have our preceptors go back through and approve all the students' encounters. Like that would be a setting we could set as well. Is that a good understanding?
Yeah. So once Lucy goes through and completes this PET submission, it's available in it's in her list here. It's also going to be back in the course as well. So as the course what coordinator or director, if you wanted to go through and make sure that students were appropriately adding all their their PET records, you can do that for sure. You also, I'm going to flip back to the main presentation here.
And we can run reporting out of this too, yes, for each student. And okay, is that where you're going?
No, that's perfect. Seriously, I love it. This is super helpful for me. So you can do, for PET administration, you can change, I mentioned all these different terms. You can add and delete, change, whatever, all of those terms in there. And then you also have reports based on what we see here. Student section diagnosis procedures. If you want to see which procedures are being done across your curriculum by year or in total, you can see that all here. You can also export the PET entries. And then I'm going to click into a course. I think, Hales, is that rotation 6?
I want to say it is, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I just did this encounter now today. Oh no, I did this previously. Today's not the 13th. So it's a different course, but you can see all of the encounter log here for all the students that would have added something to. So I'm just at a course level right now. So in that case, a clinical course. So every single student that has made a submission can be here. This is also exportable too. If you want a CSV report of it, or if you just want to live in here, it will be there as well. Also, information is all sortable. Of course, I only have one line in here, but any of these, it's just classic alphanumeric. So if you want to sort of by name and see all the items that just Lucy has done, if you're looking for one student, if you want to look at the diagnoses that are in together as well, you can search it there. So you can run a report off of it, or you can even just come to the course and kind of have that bird's eye view just to take a peek there.
This is reporting that we run on a weekly basis for all the students on rotation so that we can review certain types of encounters. And typically we're exporting to Excel. I noticed that you're saying a lot of CSV, and I have to admit, I just don't work a lot in it besides doing actual uploads into like a software. I'll use a CSV format, but normally I'm using Excel. So can we export into Excel with this?
I'll check. I think the default for most of our reports are CSV or PDF. That might also be my misunderstanding if that's what I'm used to, and I say CSV a lot. So, but Hale, so we can jot that down too. I'll check to see if there's a default way to
And on that note too, something that's become very helpful to me in this last year has been the ability to upload like into preceptor profiles, student profiles, that sort of thing. For example, that's how we track affiliate faculty for preceptors and for students. I'm sorry, I'm struggling with the student application now, but that's okay. The point is that I've used this feature. So if a field exists that I've been able to use, well, it starts as an Excel, I save it as a CSV, I'm able to upload it and it fills that field for the people that I'm requesting. Is that something that you're able to do?
What type of info? It probably is dependent on the type of information you're bringing
This would
in.
be like a small amount of text information. Essentially, what I'm uploading is does this person have affiliate faculty? When does it expire? Have they been contacted and by who and what date? Stuff like that.
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head as far as like being able to import. I know that you can import multiple information about multiple people, in Leo, and that if it is new information, it will overwrite what you previously have in there. So if you were adding something new, it would overwrite that and add that to it. Some of that
cool thing I felt, and sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
If something existed in the field that I'm looking to upload to, it would overwrite it. But what I found kind of cool about it is like, for example, it's not overwriting. It's not like every time overwriting the person's personal information. You know what I mean? It's just I can ask it to just look at one field, upload to that one place.
Okay.
I found that to be extremely helpful for a group of people.
Yeah, no, that actually sounds like super cool capability. I truly don't know if we do that or not. That's something like that, especially the specific uploads of information like that is usually taken care of in training in that process. So Hales and I, when I say that we'll follow up, we'll just ask some of our training team the specifics on that it can be done. I do know, we have this long list of the different, as you see on the left bar here, the different types of data imports that can be done, but I don't know the specific. That would probably be something that would best be answered by one of our team members when they're kind of rolling up their sleeves with you and can really get in there and have a specific understanding of the exact type of information you want to bring in. And before, I know we're running out of time. Before we go, I do want to show you, I know we talked about lotteries in Leo. So lotteries in Leo are, actually, I'm going to flip to a slide as well, just to kind of give you some overview. So you can do them for courses, individual events, or groups. You can have lotteries run on all of those items. You can set a flexible minimum and maximum setting. So as I flip back to, I'm going to go into an actual lottery. And elements in Leo are just the clerkship and the location and the timing. So you can see that we have the name of it, where it's located. That's something in West Florida here, and then the date, the duration of that clerkship. So those are elements. Oops, and you can set the minimum and maximum for those elements, so that meaning that they can't have more than 6 students, but in order for the course to actually be to be something that can be used, it has to have a minimum number of students. That's almost kind of like an undergrad thing that you think you have to have X amount of students before a course section is realized. So more often than not, people just keep that set at 0. So if your maximum is 6 and you have 1 student, then it's fine. They'll do that. I know my former employer at OSU, we had 200 to 300 different elements for our lottery for students to choose from because we had so many sites throughout the state. So you can't have a large amount of sites that students go to. And if no student selects their preferences for those elements, they won't go to those. And that's,
So can I ask you, this is something I'm getting a little confused about in terminology, and I just want to make sure to clarify with you. So when you're saying lottery, are you saying like we put 70 names into a hat and student 1 is chosen and they get everything they've asked for, followed by student 2, they get everything they've asked for minus student 1, student 3, see what I'm saying? Or are you talking about all preferences are considered at the same time? Like Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, no, terrific question. So what we do is, so we're looking at the elements right now, right? And we have the maximum number of students that they can take. You will ask students, and this isn't the student screen, you will have students do a ranking of where of the sites that they want for their clerkship that they want to attend. And so let's say, I'm going to use this top one as the example with a maximum of 4. Let's say we have 7 students that rank that I'm going to go the other way. Let's say we have 2 students ranked at their number 1 choice, and that's it in the entire course. Those students will get that assignment because they're the only 2 that had it as their number 1. Let's say now you have 6 students that rank it as their number 2. There's only 2 spaces available for those 6 students that ranked it as their number 2. So it's going to run a lottery for those final 2 spots based on those 6 students that made it their number 2 location, because number 1s have already been filled. Just the same way, let's say, again, there's a maximum 4 and 8 students make it their number 1. It will run a lottery amongst those 8 students to see which 4 are chosen at random to get those 4 spots. So each element or location is in of its own self, runs its own lottery. So
okay,
you know,
so the lottery is run by location, not by student.
Correct. And you can run different types of lotteries, like I was saying, like for whether it is something for that course, for that like clerkship assignment. And there are different ways that your lottery can be assigned. At its base level, it is that it's ran on the location, so it doesn't consider each student at a time. There is after you run your lottery, you'll get a report that shows the amount of which percentage of students got their number 1 choice, which students got their number 2, their number 3, their number 4. The lottery, once it's finished, doesn't go to students and place them automatically right away. You can do a manual check to make sure that there are some. It's a lottery, and as much as it's unlikely to happen when you have a lot of different locations. There could be a chance. I'm going to use Hales and I's as the example again, that since each location is its own lottery, Haley could continuously win that lottery in theory, and I could continually lose that lottery. So there is the manual ability to go back in and say, hey, Dan got the short end of the stick here. Haley's and you can make and the students won't know this. They won't know that you made a manual check to have more equality across the board. Truth be told, that manual check's really just for more peace of mind on your side than anything. For the most part, it's not needed, since the nature of the lottery will take care of it appropriately. And this is another thing, that the lottery is, as I'm sure you all know too, it's a big process to have your elements in and all the students. So this is something that for sure our team does help with the lottery process, especially first one for sure. This won't be a read a user guide article and run your whole lottery. Yeah, you'll for sure, I would venture to guess, have a call with our team just to make sure everything is set up appropriately. And then this is all easily repeatable. So if you want to use the same elements next year for the lottery, you don't have to re-input all those. You would just be able to roll that information over.
Are we able to meet with your team? Currently, we meet every year with the lottery team, and they actually don't call it a lottery, but they have their own process. But like, we meet with them every year to make sure that we've done we kind of have a schedule that we work on. We meet a couple of times prior every single year. Then it's like the days that we're running it, we're meeting more frequently. So we probably have like, if you take maybe a week's worth of calls, but not that all of them are long, but maybe 7 calls or something like that, or 7 or less every year, to make sure that we're ready to go and have kind of our hands held through this process. Because this is probably one of the biggest things that we do. It's a big responsibility to our students, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, it's funny, even though I mentioned I used to use Leo and all that, I was fortunate I wasn't one of the folks that was in the lottery process, because I do have an appreciation for the totality of the job that goes into it. But with our team does as well. So typically with those big ones, like osteopath or allopathic medical schools do like the curriculum inventory every year, and that's a big old process as well, just like this. Those big ones like curriculum inventory and the lottery process, our team typically will meet with you each year as you're preparing that, I mean, let's be honest, if you do it once a year, it's tough to remember every year. especially if you're using all other features, and I know there's other ed tech things that you're using as well, and so they're cognizant of that, and they'll do a call for sure. The neat thing about the Leo lottery, since it is so easily repeatable year after year, unless you're making wholesale changes, after you do it a couple times, the process is so easily repeatable in Leo that it tends not to be too much of a cumbersome ask on you all. It's the first one or two, yeah, it's new and it is a lot of data in there, but as you do it more and more, even if it's only once a year, I think you'll find that it's something that you can confidently do as well without needing our team. Not that they wouldn't be there if you needed them, but
I know that we're kind of wrapping up. It's been about an hour. I just wanted to ask to refresh my memory on time tracking. We don't do time tracking actually in the clinical year, but it is a didactic year function that is currently done in the eValue where I work. So it's one of those rare reports that I actually do run it for the didactic year, which normally I don't work in a lot of didactic year reporting except on an annual basis.
Tracking time, you mean faculty tracking?
I mean student time tracking. Like this is where they would input their service learning hours. So this is volunteer work that they do. So they have the ability to come in and say, I did this activity for X many hours. They are required to do a certain number of hours. I think a year, a semester. I'm not as familiar with it. I run the report off the beginning of the year to the current date throughout the year. So
okay, that's a great question. You could do that. There's a couple different ways to skin a cat in Leo with that. There can be anything. Let's say you can make a service learning course, and students can add personal events tied to that course. So that would be the easiest way to track it. Truly, it would be a service learning course. Student would add a time on that calendar, and then it would be that those hours would be tracked. They can also add it to
add time like that. Pick a day,
like a duration. Yeah. So if I go like, let's flip back to Lucy here. If I go back to her calendar, she can add a personal event. And I'm struggling on the specifics of it for this, and I just worked through this with a colleague that they can have it tied to a course. So I'm just checking on this here. Yeah, I don't know the specifics on the top of my head, but I know they can add a personal event to their calendar that can then be tracked and by faculty. They can do it in PET here. The new PET, which it doesn't have it here, they can add duty hours as well in PET, and you can run reports based on duty hours specifically. So if they did want, and that's probably the easiest way is in the patient encounter tracking, just to add their duty hours. And you can see, you can add, down to the minute, you can add hours and minutes.
So it would almost be like wanting to use this patient encounter tracking. I don't know. This actually sounds like maybe a setup thing you would probably talk about, because it's a little confusing to do it in patient encounters, because you'd almost have to have two different ways to do it based on which level of student they were. Because you don't want them to have to enter a whole bunch of NA information to just the tracking of it for the didactic year students, and for the clinical year students, we want all that information. So but I can see, I more was just asking if you had the capability. It sounds like
we do.
You do.
Yeah, we do. There's probably 3 different ways at the top of my head that I could think to do it. And it's just dependent on how you want to access that information. The new user interface for PET, actually, when you click into the screen here, which I really wish we were doing this 2 weeks from now, you'd see that there's 2 buttons at the top, and it's a patient encounter tracking or enter duty hours. So it does take you to 2 separate tracks within that.
That's great. Thank you, Dan.
Of course. I do. I appreciate all of the questions. But seriously, this is way better. There's sometimes we do these and I will talk for 40 minutes and then ask if there's questions, and everyone just stares at me and I don't know if I just bored them to death or if they actually care. So I know that you all care. And thank you so much for guiding this through today with your questions. I know we're over time now. What we can do is, I know we've had a handful of questions that we weren't able to answer for you right now. So Hales and I, after this call, will go and bug our team, which we're both pretty good at this point, and we will we'll share the recording today, and then we will have answers for those questions. Some, Mary, to be honest, like with some of that data import, maybe that's a more in-depth question at a training time, because they would need to probably ask you 10 questions back to make sure that they're nuancing it specifically what you want. But as much as we can get out in front of you, we most certainly will do that.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Well, thank you both again for your time. We always appreciate it. We'll do
Absolutely.
our best to follow up quickly. I know we have the holidays coming up, and that always kind of derails things a little bit as we try to move forward, but we'll make sure we get all that information to you. And then do you all have a break where you're off, or are you working through?
I guess kind of I mean, we basically do have a break, but we do have students starting the first week of January.
Okay.
So I feel like for me, if I do, I may have some work over the break, but essentially I'll be off, and that will be nice.
Okay. Yeah, us too. So we won't bug you either. So we'll get to the information before. If you have follow-up questions before we can communicate quickly enough, awesome. We'll do our best to help with that. And if not, we can always start up the conversation once we get back from break and answer those questions for y'all.
That
Sounds great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you very much,
Awesome.
Haley and Dan, for your time.
Yes, thank you for your
Our
time.
pleasure.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you, you too.
Yeah, to you as well.
Bye-bye.